who claim they marched with Martin. They went 1 mile across the Edmund Pettus Bridge and they were done. But it's really about the people who stay with the struggle lifelong, because it is a never-ending struggle. So I want to tell you 2 things before I start my talk. One is, I'm a cultural critic, and I want to tell you what that is. Cultural critics look at the way stories are put together to tell you what reality is. So you think that reality is that you just tell a story the way you learn to tell a story, probably linearly, chronologically, but there is a science to that convinces people how to see the world. So you know that saying about when lions write history? That means there's more than one way to tell the story. So even though all these years we integrated schools and we even managed long after the fight to get Black History Month and Women's History Month, we're telling those stories exactly the same way as our so-called oppressor. Are you following me? Mm-hmm. We may be talking about something different, but we're talking about it in the very same way that they talked about it, which means that it completely erases and obscures, among many things, Black women. Black women are invisible, and so they are made invisible by the ways we tell stories. So you may be, you allocate the fact that we were doing history, right? So we had to even make a term to be able to say that we existed in the passage of time, or you wouldn't, because history literally means his story, right? Mm-hmm. And so you don't know what women are doing much of any time unless they tell you. Okay, so I also want to tell you that I had the very good fortune recently, a man I do not know and have never met, asked me if I would be willing to participate in a research project to take oral histories from women here in Greensboro who were part of the North Carolina Federation of Colored Women's Garden Clubs. That's a long name, and I was happy to talk about something for once that was other than lynching, which is my scholarship. And so I said, yes, absolutely, I would love to do that. And it turned out there are 9 women who are still alive who were part, I don't want to say of the original one because that was invented in the 1890s, but they were part of the movement here that changes what I'm going to tell you in a minute. So I said, yes, absolutely, I want to be a part of that. And then I never heard from him again. Some other people were so he sent me some documents, and I started going through these documents, and it's just piles and piles of National Archive things, right? And I shouldn't have started at 11:30 at night, but that's what I did. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to use the search feature and see if I can find some people I know. Because part of the reason I agreed to do it is that I felt like I was going to know some of these women. I was born into a family of activists, and my father and I, Dr. Milton Barnes, moved to Greensboro the summer of 1959, right before the Civil Rights Movement, the Lunch County Sit-In movement. My grandfather, Dr. B.W. Barnes, was very involved in all of that. And so I came into a family that means to be part of the discussion of whatever we're talking about, as do I. And so I put my grandmother's name in the search engine, and she showed up 27 times. Now, I've never heard of this. This was in one document. I never heard of this organization. I didn't know anything about it, but I remember that she had this enviable garden. It was flowers in the front and vegetables in the back, which wasn't unusual in the 60s because people were still trying to grow their food. And we need to go back to that quickly. Okay, so I'm going to put a pin in the story right there. You know why I'm talking about this. But I want to go back for a second to the very concept of how we understand history and how history is taught and why we cannot allow these curriculum to be erased. As you see, if you're keeping up with the news, they are systematically taking all of this stuff out of schools. They're not only taking the courses out, They're taking the DEI out. They're taking anything that says you need to know something other than what white men are doing, okay? So, traditionally, history is taught as discrete time. You learn about eras and epochs, right? You learn about the Civil War, and you know what those years are that continue. But it also can be understood as process versus a discrete entity that repeats. And to your point, history is about every 65 years it repeats itself, and we are in a repetition cycle right now. So keep your eyes open, because you see it's not good. Don't let it run up on you. The other thing is that history is about a hegemonic perspective. It is about the winners. It is about the people that have the right to tell the story, and they speak for and about the so-called other. With me? Mm-hmm. Okay, which is the so-called losers, or us. It is about men and the self. And so it lionizes individual action. What did I do? How did I go to Congress? How did I build this wall? How did I run for office? Whatever that is. And the historical thesis is almost always dominance, transcendence, force, and novelty. We're always trying to reinvent something, right? We don't want old things. We don't want old people now. We want nothing old. Everything's got to be new. That's how you keep the market going. The context for all of this action is almost always the marketplace and the economy, and abroad. And by abroad, I don't mean foreign countries, but I also mean that. I mean just not where this dominant force is standing. Someplace other than where I'm standing needs to be adjudicated by me, okay? And then the future. We're always worried about the future. Where's the gas going to come from? Where's the food going to come? Where's the microchip going to come from, right? Well, Black history, as we understand it, is basically about slavery. If you're lucky and went to college, the Harlem Renaissance, right? And the Civil Rights Movement. Name some other stuff. Obama. I took that from you. Right, and beyond that, most people don't know much of anything else unless you're a Black history major, and there are very few of us. Black women's history is about collective action. It's not about the self. It's not about the individual. It's about how we all work together, what you said, right, to change things, to make this life livable for people that don't get mentioned in the first place, okay? Our historical thesis is the Mbusa Saga. It's unity, it's nurturance, it's collective action and responsibility, it's purpose, faith, and cooperative economics. This is what women talk about when they talk about things, when they write their stories, when they tell their stories. They are making quilts together, one, to show which way to go on the Underground Railroad, but also to send people to college, right? So all of those things together represent what our perspective is or used to be. The context is home, which is to say the community. I don't mean your house. I mean your community, your neighborhood, wherever we are. And the present always builds on the past, okay? And it honors protection, support, and the advancement of the group. When you think about what people are saying, these are the things they're saying in the histories of the past. Are you still with me? Mm-hmm. Okay. I usually would take a whole semester to tell you this, but I'm going to give it to you like this. Gotta go fast. Okay. So according to history, women are wives and mothers of men. Daughters don't hardly count unless they're going to marry you off to somebody, right, for profit or for social and political benefit. They are political supporters. Think Betsy Ross. What do you know about Betsy Ross other than she did what the bill told her when they came in and said, we need a flag? Right. Okay. They're not actors. Think Harriet Tubman. Right? Harriet Tubman did the do. All right. Black women, therefore, in this history are invisible, are considered invisible, irrelevant, and disposable. of course, our superpowers and the things that keep us going, that make us strong across time, that make us be able to sit here and have lived through all the million things we've lived through and that are waiting for us to live through again, is in part our invisibility. Until Kamala Harris got in the White House, nobody knew what black women would, and the Supreme Court Justice, say her name. We're basically invisible to other people unless we have one woman that transcends that moment, and then people celebrate that one woman, right? Oprah, Michelle Obama, okay, and Gail. We did get Gail in there, but thank God, right? Because that means there was somebody other than just her. Our persistence, our connectivity, our orality. Most of what you learned, I can't really see out here in this audience well, but I'm guessing many of you were born like in the 60s, maybe before, 50s, 60s, 70s, like that. And so if you were, your mother and your grandmother told you a lot of things that you're carrying with you today. You didn't get it from YouTube, you didn't get it from a book. People talked to you and told you what kind of man to love and get with and which one to run from, right? Okay, that's the orality I mean. And so we are, in many ways, the way we envision ourselves, and perhaps you saw the movie, as women warriors, right? We don't let folks walk off without children, without a fight, right? We struggle to get progress. We're the one in the trenches trying to make this progress that nobody's talking about, and because it focused the camera on whoever the one man is they've chosen to follow. And a perfect example of that is that we know Martin Luther King was the real deal. Yeah. But there was a whole bunch of people on that march. There were a whole bunch of people at the lunch counter. We talk about 4 men. And when those 4 men got up, some more people sat, and some more people sat, and an endless number of people sat, because that's how we do, right? But that's not how the story gets told. Yeah. All right, I hear you now. All right, so this organization comes about during the industrial age. This is after post-Reconstruction, all the parties are over, and whatever improvements and advancements we were going to make as black people have been crushed to earth. People have been murdered. We have either gone to the cities or we are back on the farm somewhere sharecropping. The industrial age destabilizes society because people migrate and there's mechanization. So all the things that people used to do, and especially black people used to do with their hands, isn't as valuable anymore because we are in the age of machines, right? And so you have a lot of people who are going north to cities and urban centers, north into the Midwest, to all these different places. So when they get there, they don't have the same things they had in their homes that taught them how to behave and what was valuable, their culture, right? You can't go from where I saw in Mississippi to New York City. I lived in Mississippi for 2.5 years. It was a revelation, okay? And you can't go from there to New York City and not be like this, right?
That's me when I came down here.
So you got the destruction of the home and the community. If we're used to working together and now the we is over, right now you've got angst and problems. It's also the end of World War I. The soldiers have come back, and here again, let's talk about who can be seen and who cannot be seen. The soldiers come back, and they are spreading venereal diseases through this country like it's free chicken. Do you hear me? Just passing it around. Because prior to that, you didn't sleep with anybody but your wife, in theory.
The military?
In theory. When they went to war, and they had all these prostitutes and things, once they came back from war, how you gonna keep them down on the farm once they've seen Paris? Right? So they come back home and they're like, I can sleep with anybody I want. And I've got all these people who are loose and don't have anywhere to go and don't fit in. And I want you to think about how that jibes with undocumented people now who are in all these cities and don't have anywhere to be. I weak to think what is happening to them, because people know they can do something to them, they won't be held accountable. It's like free, right? And so the fact that they're passing all this venereal disease around makes it really important for men to control women and to keep women at home so that they don't spread it to their children, right? Now, they might give it to you, but they don't want you to give it to them. And so a lot of social rules and policies that come out at this time are less about their notions of God than it is about disease. Okay, so all this propriety about how women are supposed to behave is less about what Jesus said you should do than it is about this disease. Think Tuskegee Institute experiment. Yeah, I remember. Right? Okay. So the other thing is all this illegitimacy because you're having sex anywhere you want. And legitimacy, again, is less about Jesus than it is about property. Your children that you prove are your children are the ones who are going to inherit. Thank you. I'm a long COVID sufferer. Have mercy on me. Is that property that your children are going to inherit? If so, you've seen this on the TV show, right? Some kid shows up when you die, and they're talking about, that's my daddy too, and I want your house. No, so legitimacy becomes really important. And what you see after the jazz age, and the jazz age, everybody's sleeping with everybody, right? You saw, oh, now I can't start freelancing because I can't think of the name of anything. What was the thing about, never mind. Anyway, in the jazz age, people were being promiscuous. After the jazz age, they clamped down and become very strict about who has sex with who and when and under what circumstances. Huh? Yes, but I'm trying to think about F. Scott Fitzgerald.
The Great Gatsby?
Great Gatsby. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, everybody read The Great Gatsby in college. They made you read it because it said that men can do whatever they want and women better watch out. You might not have known that's what it meant. Okay, so people are also raping because they're not accountable. All these people are floating around, and you don't necessarily have to worry about somebody's father coming to get you because women are now put out to work in ways that they would have worked with their families on the farm prior to that. Okay? So at this time also is the reinvention of slavery. Slavery and Reconstruction are over. And they have decided that the workforce that used to do everything for free has gotten away. And now we have to reinvent it, because if there's one thing Americans mean to do is to have free or cheap labor. And they will take it to another country and oppress some people the way they did us, but they're not paying for any labor. All right? And so this is the moment in which you have sharecropping. I'm going to charge you to grow this food, and I'm going to take your money from you at the end. I'm not going to be fair with you about the sell, right? Convict lease. And most importantly, you may not know this part, this is the time when they start seizing people's children. They seize all kinds of children. Black children, Native American children. If you know anything about the Indian boarding schools, they would take those Native children from their parents as early as 2, and they were not allowed to go back home until they were 21. Okay, so and by the time they had you for all those years and exposed you to all those atrocities, when you got home, you were no longer Indian. In fact, their motto is kill the Indian, save the man. They're doing this to everybody, not just them. All right? It's just that as education goes in this cycle too, you get to learn about these things at various times as people have the power to bring that to the table, so you can learn it. So we have Black history departments in schools, but very few Native American departments in colleges, right? So if you don't have some kind of, here's a curse word now, woke professor, you think of all the things you can't know. So I'm really talking about what you can't know based on the ways that information is given to us and that we pass on to each other. Because even if you're giving your grandchildren books for Christmas, guess how those books are written, if you're not careful and read them yourself, to see if they're telling the story the right way. You with me? All right, here we go. Okay, so black children had long been fodder for the machine of capitalism, from slavery on through the end of, through this period. And their vulnerability specifically that made them fodder was the threat of orphanhood. If you were an orphan, somebody had to put you somewhere. Now here's the trick, and it goes back to what I'm saying about gender. You're an orphan if your father is dead, not if your mother is dead. Your mother can be right there in the house, but if your father is dead, you're an orphan and somebody's got to come get you because she doesn't know what to do with you. She doesn't know how to raise you. Have you ever heard anything so crazy in your life? Who's doing the raising, right? Okay, delinquency, which means you weren't someplace that somebody told you you should be, the farm, the factory, the bedroom. That's what delinquency was. And sexual oppression. Nobody can keep anybody from sexually exploiting you in this time. Nobody. Not, even if they have a gun. They're going to murder the person with the gun, and then they're still going to do what they're going to do to you. Now, in the midst of all of that, you with me now with what's going on in the time? The National Association of Colored Women is founded by activists, community leaders, and educators like Ida B. Wells Garnett, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin, Harriet Tubman, Mary Church Terrell, and Margaret Mary Washington in 1896. I hope you know some of those names, because if you don't call those names, they are erased from all time. Later, they incorporate as the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, creating statewide associations with local chapters which facilitated their mission. So it's a national organization. They set up state clubs, and the North Carolina Club is part of that. Each chapter is named after a flower. The North Carolina Federation of Colored Women's Clubs is founded in 1909 and was one of 28 national associations at that time. By 1914, there were 50,000 members, black women running stuff under the table in this country, okay? But they're invisible, somebody knows it. And beginning in 1919, Charlotte Hawkins Brown, hopefully you know that name as a local heroine, who founded the Palmer Memorial Institute, recruits Mary McLeod Bethune, who had founded the Daytona Educational and Industrial Training School for Negro girls, which was a shelter that later becomes Bethune-Cookman College. But it starts out as a shelter for Negro girls. Okay, I use the term shelter loosely. She helps Charlotte Hawkins Brown raise funds to start a reformatory, because they felt like they needed to reform your attitude and behavior to keep you out of this machine, right? If you're exploited as a child, certainly sexually, you may develop habits that they want to flush out of you before somebody can see you have those habits and exploit you further. Okay, so I'm trying to go ahead. They explained so North Carolina had 2 reformatories for white boys at this time. One for black boys that was ironically named the Stonewall Jackson, insultingly named Stonewall Jackson Memorial Training and Industrial School in Concord, and one for white girls. Black girls who were considered delinquent were put in adult prisons, and often co-ed prisons.
What?
Let me let you sit with that for a second. Girls 6 to 16 who were considered orphans or considered delinquent or put into prison with adult, often males. Okay? So they decide, delinquency could mean truancy, sexual promiscuity, running away, or stealing. Now, if you don't have anything to eat, we see this again. If you don't have anything to eat and nowhere to be, why wouldn't you go steal some food? I'm going to. Okay? Or it could mean something as simple as lying, stubbornness, sullenness. Do y'all know any teenagers? It's the hallmark of teenageness, right? So you could go to prison for being sullen, Glad I didn't know that as a
What does that mean?
teenager.
Like giving attitude?
Orphans were housed with delinquents, as I said before. So if you were an orphan, you went with the delinquents wherever the delinquents were put. And the National Negro Women sought to correct this. They decided to take this on as their agenda, their social agenda, and they were going to change this, right? So the North Carolina Federation raised enough money to purchase 143 acres in Eflin, North Carolina. Do you know where Eflin is? In Orange County. Off 85, you pass it all the time, and don't even look over there. There's nothing really on that exit. Okay, so they bought this 143 acres for $7,100. Where'd they get $7,100 from? That's a lot of fish fries, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, which would be $123,000 today. And they solicited $30,000 extra dollars in private donations to launch the reformatory, to get it up and running. In May 1925, at its annual meeting held in Wilson, North Carolina, the organization celebrated the completion of a one-story, weatherboarded, hip roof, they called it a cottage, that cost them $4,600 to build. The building contained a central living room, which was used as a classroom, dormitory-style bedrooms, matrons' quarters, bathrooms, dining room, a kitchen, and a basement furnished room. This is amazing. Are you amazed by this? I was. Right here, in our midst. Have you ever heard of this place? Me neither. And I do this, and I never heard of it. There were 4 adult employees, an administrator, a matron, a teacher, and a farm manager. The home was conceived as a working farm where the girls were compelled to cultivate corn, tobacco, wheat, cotton, potatoes, and fruit trees. They also husbanded a mule, 2 cows, 2 pigs, 4 hogs, and 100 chickens. The North Carolina Juvenile Court placed 23 girls in this reformatory that was built for 15 in 1926. Okay? Their annual operating budget was $8,000. At most, one time the state of North Carolina gave them $2,000, and they felt really lucky to get it. At most, it was that one time. And the rest of the time, they had to be responsible for making sure that these girls ate and lived indoors themselves, on top of the $30,000 we talked about. Okay? So the whole idea of these children farming also echoes the convict lease system, where when it was time for, when you needed to build something or grow something or whatever, you had to arrest a whole bunch of people and put them in prison so you would have a labor force. Well, they're doing that with these children. They're not necessarily raising this food for themselves, but they're raising it and selling it to other people. So even though they're in the shelter, and the women have them in a shelter, the economy of that time is that they have to grow this for other places. Well, every blessing hides a curse. And in 1937, based on the fact that they can't get the right funding, and because they don't have the right funding, they can't keep the house going, the facility was considered woefully lacking. It had a single bathroom, the facility's single bathroom, heating system, and water supply were deemed inadequate. The kitchen stove was the only heating source, as the basement furnace flooded every winter and rendered it inoperable. The pump was out of commission, making it impossible to draw water from the well. And by then, the windows had been covered with barbed wire to discourage runaways. And yet the institution persevered for another 2 years when the state decided that these girls would be better off in prison than in this home. Now, I will say to you, because I got the signal, I got to stop, is that that this all falls apart, not because the women in the organization aren't doing every single thing they can do, but what happens is that the men won't support them, even the ones whose work they're doing for them by taking care of these girls, and the black men who should be backing them up are jealous of their support, that they have done all of this by themselves and did not have to have their support in order to pull this off. I guess I have to come back next time to tell you what the conclusion is. But it's really a very interesting thing. I can tell you, I found it on Google Maps. I went there and found the house, but I couldn't get up to it, and it looked really scary out there. But I have been able to see that the house is still standing and is being renovated, so I'm going to try and know more. Thank you so much.